Hello, fellow Wisconsinites. Welcome to the 350 Wisconsin podcast. My name is Katie. I am your host for this episode, and I am 350 Wisconsin's Community Climate Solutions intern this semester, while I finish up my environmental science degree at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And this is one of my projects that I've been working on this semester, along with some other community outreach work that I've been doing with the Community Climate Solutions team here at 350 Wisconsin, with one of my other bigger projects being developing classroom talks to instill a mindset of caring for the earth at younger ages and just ensuring that children have opportunities to learn about environmental issues and the science behind them at any age by helping start clubs in the various Madison surrounding schools, and not just the high schools but the middle schools as well. But the goal of this podcast is to provide you, the listeners, with information regarding current environmental events statewide and information about what's new and ongoing in 350 Wisconsin and how you might be able to get involved if you're interested in that, along with practical ways to reduce your carbon footprint on an individual level if that's something that's more realistic to you in your situation. And it's really just meant to bring us together as Wisconsinites, as an environmental community, and as people that just want to give back to the earth and promote a better future. So if you haven't heard of our organization before, we should discuss what 350 is and what we do and how we forward environmental progress. So 350 Wisconsin is actually a part of the Greater 350 organization, which is an international movement of people that's working to end the age of fossil fuels. And the 350 in the name actually comes from the safe concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is 350 parts per million. And if you didn't know, we're currently sitting around 415 parts per million. So the 350 organization has affiliates throughout the world working to reduce the carbon emissions of specific regions. We were previously 350 Madison, along with 350 Stevens Point and 350 Milwaukee. And while those two are still independent allies of the 350 organization, 350 Madison has now become 350 Wisconsin because our work at 350 Madison was just increasingly taking us throughout the state and beyond Dane County. So on Earth Day 2022, we officially became 350 Wisconsin. We are run for and by the people of Wisconsin, so this only makes sense. We have made a dedication to educating and involving the citizens of this state in the processes of creating and progressing environmental laws and policies to mobilize achievements in environmental justice and just reducing the state's carbon emissions. But before we get into some of what 350 Wisconsin has been doing to progress those goals, I'd like to talk about the history of Earth Day, since not many people are actually aware that it first began in our state, which I think is really cool. So if you were unaware, Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson established the first Earth Day back in 1970. And of course, 1970 is in the midst of the Vietnam War era, so students all across the country were protesting the war. Our students at the University of Madison were leading anti-war protests. And also around this time was when environmental consciousness and activism was really gaining traction. Post-World War II, Rachel Carson had written Silent Spring, and if you haven't heard about that or read it in school, that's a book about changes in the environment due to the use of toxic chemicals as pesticides on crops. And when I say changes in the environment, this book talks about many different ones, but specifically less birdsong in the spring, hence the title Silent Spring. And if we continue to use these chemicals and treat the earth this way, we won't have any birdsong in the spring anymore or in our mornings. And that can be a really depressing thought to think about, but it really floored the movement of environmental awareness and that nature was vulnerable to human intervention. And so when there was a major oil spill in Southern California, it just shocked the news because of the devastating impacts of the surrounding environment. And Senator Nelson was wanting to do something about the deteriorating environment in the United States, and he was just surrounded by all of the anti-war activism. He wanted to infuse the energy of the student protests with an emerging public consciousness and awareness about air and water pollution. So he recruited local activist Dennis Hayes and a Republican Congressman, Pete McCloskey, to help make his idea happen. And so together they announced the idea for teach-ins on college campuses to the national media. And as you probably guessed it, they were successful in making this teach-in day a reality. And they obviously landed on April 22nd, as we now know. But Earth Day was born from this. They were successful in the teach-ins being an annual thing, and now, of course, it's globally celebrated by more than 193 countries. So it's really a fantastic story and motivating to have a fellow Wisconsinite ignite such a powerful and meaningful movement. And this year, the official Earth Day theme is investing in our planet, meaning that everyone, governments, industries, individuals, everyone should be doing their part to invest in helping the earth. It's about creating that paradigm shift over to green, sustainable energy from fossil fuels. We are long overdue in this. We know that it needs to happen, and we know that we can do it. So it needs to be done. But a great way to contribute to this theme of investing in our planet on an individual level is to get involved with some of the projects that we have at 350 Wisconsin. A good team of ours to get involved with actually is the 350 Wisconsin Divest and Defund team, which is a team that aims to mobilize the people's voices and power to pressure banks to take action and end their relationships with the fossil fuel industry. As you might know, a lot of the banks in our country are consistently aiding the fossil fuel industry through loans and investments and insurance. So this team takes action against those banks, and specifically JP Morgan, since they are the number one top financer of the fossil fuel industry. But the other top 5 are Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and then the 5th is RBC, which is a Canadian bank. But this team uses the power of nonviolent protest and direct action campaigning to undermine the bank's support of fossil fuels. So throughout the pandemic, they didn't stop the fight. They actually did virtual takeovers as well as protesting, which is really a great way to keep active in the environmental fight. It's pretty easy to get involved with this team if that's something that kind of interests you. Just go to our page, navigate to the 350 Wisconsin Divest and Defund tab on our website, and fill out the team interest form. But this team and our Tar Sands team are both using strategic campaigns to reform financial systems and oppose new fossil fuel infrastructure. And the Tar Sands team at 350 Wisconsin works to fight against oil pipelines being built. So they're fighting against the Enbridge natural gas distribution company from unnecessarily destroying land and building oil pipelines in our state. And they've mobilized hundreds of supporters to oppose the expansion of Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline. And that crosses into Wisconsin, into northern Wisconsin near Ashland and like across the UP. And that's a really sensitive area. And they join other fights with coalitions against building and expanding pipelines in those areas. So they've aided other movements by sending supporters and supplies out to resistance camps that are fighting against Line 3 in Minnesota. And they have sent supporters and supplies to the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock. This team is doing a lot of great environmental justice work and are successful in their protests. And if this is something that you might want to get involved with, please reach out to Phyllis Hasbrook. Her email is phyllis.hasbrook@350madison.org. Or you can just go to our website and the Tar Sands team page on our website, and you can find that email there. But another thing that if you guys are maybe not interested in necessarily going out, or you don't have the time to go out and protest like this, we do offer monthly meetings. We have a monthly meeting team at 350, and this team organizes experts and activists to come and speak on various climate topics and engage and educate our community members. It's really great. It's open to the public, so whoever is able to come and would like to attend is invited, and you can find the invite on our website as well. There's like a monthly meetings tab on the 350 Wisconsin website, and it's usually held on the first Monday of each month and is always followed by a small group discussion, which is really great just to be discussing these topics that you're interested in with other people who might understand what you're going through. It can be a really heavy burden to carry all of the climate change impacts and feeling guilty about that. I definitely understand that feeling and feel that way a lot, and just talking with other people about the issues that are happening and possible solutions or how to get involved and what can you do on an individual level to help the earth. That's really stimulating and really helps my anxiety. So I highly suggest it. I think that it does help a lot of other people's anxiety too. But our monthly meetings were usually in person, but since the pandemic, we've been holding them over Zoom. And so to join in on the monthly meetings, you just have to go to the website and find the monthly meetings tab. I think it's under events as well. If you go to that page and if you scroll down a bit to the upcoming meeting content, there will always be a link to register for the monthly meetings. And the registering only ensures that you'll receive the link to join the Zoom meeting. And then we also just have an idea of how many people might be attending. So we hope to see you at the next monthly meeting then. It's upcoming here on May 2nd, and the conversation is on opportunities for bipartisan progress in clean energy. And it's going to be a really good conversation. The guest speaker is Scott Conan, and he is the executive director for Wisconsin's Conservative Energy Forum, which is a group that is dedicated to advancing a conservative vision for clean and renewable energy in our state. So it should be a good conversation. Like I said, I will be in attendance, and I hope to see some of you guys there. But if you guys are listening to this and your schedules are really busy, or you're just looking for a more individual way to contribute to reducing carbon emissions, gardening is a great solution to that. And it's a great way to connect to the earth, and can also be a good way to invest in the planet if you're sticking to the Earth Day theme. But not only that, gardening can save you money also, and we're getting into the season for it, so now is a great time to start a garden. If you didn't know, the U.S. Department of Agriculture tracks inflation across the country, and the Consumer Price Index rose 7% for all food items from January 2021 to January 2022, and that is not even accounting for the increased spike in food prices that we've seen throughout the war in Ukraine right at the beginning of 2022. And in addition to the price of produce, we're seeing a decline in the quality of food that we get at our grocery stores, which is not great. But like I said, gardening is a great solution to this, great solution to increased food prices and decreased food quality. You can grow your own food without spending money on produce, and it's straight from the source. You know where it came from, so there's no pesticides, you know what you're putting on it, you know that it hasn't been stepped on, but this is definitely the season to start a garden. Hopefully we're starting to get some nicer weather here. I think we've seen just about the last of the cold. And you could start from seeds if you wanted to, but you could also just buy starter plants that have already been grown to an adolescent size. That might be easier for some people that have never gardened before. But for the Madisonians listening, we have many local plant nurseries to choose from if you are starting with starter plants. I always go to Kopke's greenhouse near Oregon, but there's also Stoughton Garden Center, Fitchburg Farms, Two Ferns Native Nursery in Madison, and Westar Organics in Cottage Grove. Many options, definitely. You could just Google it. But if you choose to start with seeds, please don't spend money on like the seed starter kits. You really don't need those. You could use an empty salad container. That's usually what I do. And then I always save paper towel rolls throughout the year until I have enough that I think that I need for my seed starter kits in the spring. And I just like cut them up to a small enough size. They don't need to be that big, but you just kind of put them into rows in the salad container, the plastic salad container, and then you can fill that with dirt up to the top of the roll and put your seeds in each roll, like a couple of each kind per roll. So if you're starting your first garden, I definitely recommend just doing some essential veggies that you love, that you would buy at the grocery store. My first garden, I'm trying to think, I think I had tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, and that was a great combo. Oh, and snap peas. Those are pretty easy to grow. They grow up though, so be prepared for that. Definitely look up what plants you want to grow and when the best time of year might be to grow them. But I think those are all pretty easy spring ones to start around this time of year. And so you would just put a couple of each kind of seed in each paper towel roll and then cover that with a little bit of dirt, press it down a little bit, cover it up with dirt, and then spray it with water. You don't really want to soak the whole thing with water. You just want to get it nice and moist. You can tell by the color that it'll be done. You don't want to see any seeds peek through the top of the soil. And then you're going to cover the top of the salad container with the plastic lid, maybe cut a couple holes in the top for some air circulation. And I always take a Sharpie and like write which seed I put where. So I kind of just do the circle layout in Sharpie on top, cut a few holes in it, and then I know where my seeds are and what's growing so I don't forget, because that's very me to forget, but if I don't write it down. So highly recommend to write it down. But it's really easy like that. And then just in a couple of days or weeks, you will see the beginnings of your seeds start to sprout. And once they're big enough to touch the top of the container, you can transplant them into a little container that might be better than that. Doesn't necessarily need to be enclosed. And then eventually, if you're planting outside in garden beds, you would just transfer it outside into your bed once it's big enough. And I think you would probably know when it's big enough, but if you're really unsure, you can just Google it. But it should be big enough to be standing on its own and holding up to weather, So definitely recommend buying some good dirt so you can grow some high quality plants that have lots of nutrients. So all of the nutrients in the soil is eaten by the plants, and then you are eating the plants, so you're getting the nutrients from the plants that get its nutrients from the soil. And so you want to make sure you're buying healthy organic soil full of lots of nutrients. Make a compost yourself if you are able to, and you can add it to your soil and mix it in there. Sometimes you can just buy compost too, like compost pellets. But I definitely recommend getting some good dirt for sure. And you can get some from any of the local nurseries that I was listing before, or if you have good dirt in your yard and you're planting in the ground, you can take dirt from that area for your seedlings. And with that, we are at the end of our episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys listening, and thank you for bearing with me through all the editing hiccups and the varying sounds throughout the whole podcast. I'm pretty sure my dog was in there a couple times, but I really appreciate you listening, and I hope that you learned something new while listening and maybe wanted to join some of the work we have ongoing at the 350 Wisconsin organization. But I really hope you join us next time, because we're going to be talking about more great environmental things happening throughout the state and some new things that 350 Wisconsin is doing and how to get involved with them. But I can't let you guys leave without recommending some books. I love these books. I've been reading these. I've had both of these for about a year, and I've read them a couple times just because I really like them, and they're easy reads, and they're informative and have an environmental aspect. But the first one is The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben, and that's a German author. He is also an ecologist and scientist. This book is about the secret communications in the forest, and I say secret because this book has a whimsical, magical kind of storytelling aspect to it, but it's really ecology and learning about how these trees communicate chemically, and they trade nutrients and warn each other of predators, and it's really interesting. He actually has a whole series where each book goes more in depth in the forest as a whole. So I really recommend this one and the rest of them. He also has a documentary talking about this book and the work that he does in this book. That was, I mean, it was like English and German when I watched it. I think it was mostly in German. We watched it at Christmas. It was on Amazon, though, Amazon Prime. Really good documentary, great book as well. And the other book I wanted to recommend to you guys before we go is called What We Know About Climate Change by Carrie Emanuel. And make sure you get the updated edition. I have the 2018 edition, and I think that that's the most recent. There might be a newer one. It's probably in the works if it's not. But this one in the 2018 edition is equally as informative if that's what you can get your hands on. It was first written in 2008, actually, and the author continues to update it as the science updates as well, right alongside it. And it's not hard to read, right? It's very informative on the science of climate change, but it's not hard to read. It's also kind of told like a story. So he talks about the history of climate change and how humans have contributed to it, and the consequences, the impacts of climate change that we're facing, the increase of severe weather and temperatures rising, and, loss of species diversity. But he also goes in and talks about why it's so hard for society to talk about climate change and to do something about climate change, because it's not like we don't have various solutions when, especially applied all together, can really do something to help reverse climate change and the impacts of climate change. So this is a great book to read, especially if you want to be informed and informed others. But once again, if you guys tune in for the next episode, I will have more information on how to be involved with helping the reduction of carbon emissions on an individual scale, or maybe getting involved in trying to get it reduced on a larger scale by being involved in protests and helping amplify the people's voices to governments so they can create laws and policies that are helping contribute to lower Wisconsin's carbon emissions. And so with that, I leave you. Thank you so much once again for tuning in through the editing hiccups and just bearing with me through it all. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you for the next one.